Welcome everyone to today's webinar on advanced JMeter training. My name is Ophir Prusak from BlazeMeter. I'm the VP of Customer Success. Today's session will be recorded, so we will send out a link to the recording. And if you have any questions in today's webinar, by all means, you can ask questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. And at the end, we will have some time for some Q&A. So today's session is really about advanced JMeter training. Some of the stuff we're going to cover is threads, ramp up and loops, finding breaking points, reporting, JMeter optimizations, the concept of concurrent users versus request per second in JMeter. Going to go over some script logic controllers, functional testing and checking for errors, a little about third-party plugins, advanced reporting, and at the end, some Q&A. So we have a lot to cover. I'm not going to have time to go into detail into everything. To start off, actually, I do want to say just a quick recap of what we covered last time. For those of you who haven't had a chance to review or haven't had a chance to look at the previous webinar we gave, if you do a quick Google search for Learn JMeter in 60 minutes, it really goes over the basics. We're not going to go over all this stuff, but just a quick refresher about some of the stuff that we talked about, the whole concept of a test plan. This is a vocabulary that we're going to be using. A thread group, where basically how you create users, samplers, config elements, a timer, adding a delay, a listener in terms of reporting, logging, assertions, error checking, pre and post processors, logic controller, and the workbench. So what I thought I'd do today, which is a little different from last time, is instead of just being very academic, let's actually go through the process of what you as a performance engineer might actually need to do and see how we apply that within BlazeMeter. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So let's take a look at actually 3 different websites that I use as test websites. They're each hosted with a different platform. And let's actually run a performance test on these 3 platforms. And that'll really help us, I guess, just put together all the concept of creating the test, running the test, looking at the reports. Last time, we really talked about just a single user. And performance testing is really all about understanding what the breaking limits are, or I guess how much load your website can actually handle. So that's what we're going to do today in live, real time with JMeter and BlazeMeter as well. So here's a Ghost platform. It's a blogging platform that we're going to be throwing some load at. We're going to be looking at a WordPress installation as well. And last but not least, I'm going to be testing, there is a web server called the Monkey web server. It's a high performance web server. In order to test it, what I actually did was just downloaded some content from the New York Times, put it on my own server. So I'm not hitting the New York Times website, but I'm using that just as some static content to really see how hard I can push the servers. So let's go ahead and fire up BlazeMeter. Sorry, fire up JMeter. So here's my JMeter installation. Here we go. And as you said, again, on the left, we have the tree. Here's elements at the top, the icons, and the workbench. So the first thing you want to really understand is, let's say the boss comes and says, well, we have our website, and I want to know how much traffic can we handle. So the way we actually handle traffic, or the way we actually measure traffic, is the concept of slowly increasing load and seeing at what point does the website really break. So if you think about it, when just one user is on the website, obviously can handle the load. But the best way to really find where the breaking point is, imagine if you're slowly increasing the number of users who are hitting the site. So you start with 1 user, and then 2 users, and 3 users, and so forth, until you hit maybe 1,000 users or 10,000 users. And over time, you're going to see what the response times are like. So I went ahead and created, let me go ahead and load it. File open. Here we go, New York Times. So I went ahead and created in advance here we go, New York Times. Really simple, but it covers a lot of stuff that we've talked about. Test plan that goes over the different elements that you're going to have. Now, a lot of these stuff we didn't talk about last time, so let's actually dig in and look at the elements to create a realistic test plan. So you obviously have the thread group. This is the number of users, ramp up period, loop count, etc. So if you look at this script, and this script is really easy, it's very simple, it's just a single request. But let's say I'd make a script just to make things a little more applicable with 2 requests. So here's a script with 2 requests, a home page, then another page. At the top, I have some what's called configuration elements again, and then I have what's called some listeners, which will provide me the reporting type of information that I need. So these, again, it's a right click on the thread group, add, and here's how you add the different elements. So if I go to a config element, you can see these HTTP cache manager, cookie manager, and header manager, as well as request defaults. So I've already went ahead and added some of these. So almost every single web-based test you're going to want to be doing, you're going to want a cache manager and a cookie manager. And as you can guess, the cookie manager is going to do the same implementation as you would if you had cookies on a real browser. Most websites really require cookies. And cache manager, I have to say, is critical in terms of getting accurate results of what a real browser would behave like. With a cache manager, you're basically simulating the browser's cache. Without that, every request is just going to basically look like it's a new request. So let's start with actually running this. And the listeners that I have here are the view results tree, graph results, summary report, and view results and table. And before I start, let's actually go back to where we started in terms of threads, ramp ups, and loops. So within the thread group, this is how you define a group of users. You have the number of threads. Again, this is the maximum number of users you're going to be testing with. And I'm going to start with just a really simple test of 1 or 2 users to kind of debug what I'm doing. And then I'm going to show you how to ramp up to lots of users. Ramp up period. So if you think about a test is always going to start with 1 user, and then you're going to ramp up to the total number of users. In this case, it's 20. So over a period of 40 seconds, I'm going to ramp up to 20 users. And the loop count means how many times am I going to loop over this test plan. So I could say, you know what, I could say I just want to loop over 10 times. But in most cases, I like to loop over and over and over again until ultimately you basically get to the maximum amount of users and then just kill the test manually or based on the amount of time you want. So in this test, you can see everything is empty. And I'm going to go ahead now and hit the play button, the screen play button. On the top right-hand corner, you'll also see the number of users currently running. Oh, we have an error. This error actually, obviously, is because I just added this HTTP request with nothing in it. So I'm just going to delete that really quick. And if I do Command E, it'll actually reset all the data. Again, and again, hit play just to show what's going on. You can see I'm making a request to the home page over and over and over again. And I'm going to go ahead and hit stop just so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. So you can see this first request, the response code is 200. And then there's another request where the response code is 304. So 304 again, and this is already asks you the questions, what it is that you want to test. You want to test a single person hitting the refresh button, in which case the actual content would be cached. Or do you want to be testing where there's a new user every time there's a new request, which is de facto what you probably want to be testing. Because if it's cached, you're not really putting any load on the back end. So under the cache manager, you'll notice I have under clear cache each iteration, it's not checked. When I run a test, I always have clear cache each iteration checked. So every single request, you're going to get a response code 200, and the size of the response is going to be the whole page. Now you can see this initial page request, this home page, it had a lot of sub requests in it. Wow, that's a lot of sub requests.